So again, just really thank you for showing up today and taking this time to explore the role of self-compassion as a skill that really helps not only in care partnering, but also in life. And Sarah mentioned that I'm one of those people who has had the incredible good fortune of working alongside people who are living with dementia and their families for a very long time. And then having supported my mom and dad, my mother who died of Alzheimer's disease in 2015, and my dad who's 95 and still living with vascular dementia. And both of them have been amazing teachers to me. So, I just, part of bringing mindfulness and self-compassion to these webinars is because they've served me really well in building my own resilience chest. And so we're going to explore how that, how that can be helpful for you as well. And one of the things that's been so impressive is to begin to see the growing research on mindfulness as well as self-compassion, really more in the areas of not so much with caregivers yet and care partners yet, but growingly it's the science and the actual impacts on the mind and the brain, which really have spoken very powerfully to me. So to the point that I went ahead and became a certified mindfulness meditation teacher and involved in bringing a course called Mindfulness-Based Dementia Care to Canada from the US, where it was originated. So let's, I'll share a presentation with you and we'll go from there. We'll have time to have some good conversation at the end of our time together. There we go. There, okay. So the title of the presentation is Building Resilience for the Dementia Caregiving Journey. And this is part 2, the skill of self-compassion. And so just to touch again on the concept of resilience, and I love this quote from Linda Graham, who's done a lot of teaching around resilience and has written a couple of books. And she describes resilience as the capacity to bend with the wind, to go with the flow, and to bounce back from adversity. And that's a very beautiful, kind of way of imagining what we have to do, especially in life in general, but when we are supporting somebody who's living with cognitive change, we really need that capacity to be flexible, that capacity to bend with the wind, because things often go a different way than we had imagined them to, or to go with the flow so that we're not constantly trying to resist what's happening, because that causes us more suffering. And also we need to be able to bounce back from adversity, because all kinds of interesting things happen in this care partnering journey. And so resilience really helps to build our capacity to do that. My friend and colleague Gail Gazelle has another definition of resilience I really appreciate, which is resilience is a well of inner resources that allows us to weather the difficulties and the challenges we encounter in life without unnecessary mental, emotional, or physical distress. And the unnecessary piece is really important, because there's lots in life that we actually can't control. We can't control the fact that the person we're supporting is living with an illness that's changing their way of thinking and the way of perceiving the world. But the only things we can really shift are the way we relate to what is happening, and to be sure that we are able to use all our wonderful problem-solving skills to the best of our ability, that we're not being hijacked by our emotions and sort of feeling bogged down. So 2 of the inner resources we want to connect with and really develop are mindfulness and self-compassion. And actually today we'll hear more about mindfulness in the context of self-compassion. I love this quote. It says, "Something will grow from all you are going through, and it will be you." Because while dementia care partnering can be very demanding, it can also be a period of real growth. particularly when we set a conscious intention to be open to what it has to teach us. And this sort of mindset is called a growth mindset. So it's actually at the heart of resilience, is what is in this for me to learn? How can I relate to this in a way that that actually will help me to grow? And I don't know about you, but personally, my greatest sort of learning has arisen from difficulty. I very rarely learn when things go smoothly because I don't really have to pay as much attention. But when things are challenging, that's often when I learn most about myself. So you might want to reflect on that and see if that's true for you. So mindfulness and self-compassion can really help us to work with our experiences, the experiences of actually the care partnering, and also our emotions that arise from them. So have you ever noticed that it's pretty much impossible to do this care partnering thing perfectly? You know, things go awry, no matter how careful we are, no matter how much we try. It's life. It's actually, imperfection is the reality of life, and it's certainly the reality in care partnering. We can trigger our care partners, and they can become angry or sad or hurt in our interactions, sometimes even responding to things that we don't realize have been upsetting. They can become triggered, and they can be also quite oblivious to all the ways that we're trying to support them and probably expressing their frustration at every turn, and often in our direction. So their triggering often then triggers us, and then we can feel profoundly unappreciated, we can feel criticized, or we can feel so frustrated and angry that we then react in ways that trigger them more, and then we're in this cascade of triggering of each other. So mindfulness practice that we talked about on our 2 weeks ago, it helps us to recognize the early warning signs of our triggering, and also the early warning signs of our partner's triggering, because it helps us to slow down and to respond rather than react. But even so, no matter how much we practice, no matter how much I practice meditation, no matter how much I work with my mind, we can't respond in the ideal manner every time we all get triggered. So, and this is true in dementia care partnering and also in life. So I'm going to invite you to explore an experience that may or may not sound familiar to you. So it's a story, basically. And I want you to imagine that this is you that I am describing. So this person who's just arriving is in the picture, with their arms full of groceries, has just arrived home from a very busy shopping expedition after completing a whole day full of to-do lists and having obviously got a pretty full life. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and imagine that this story is yours. So you arrive home after a busy outing to the grocery store with mask and social distancing protocols, making it an even bigger adventure than it was a year ago. You arrive carrying this armful of groceries, and your care partner meets you at the top of the stairs with an angry expression. Where the hell have you been? You always disappear, and I haven't a clue where you've gone. You never tell me where you're going. You could be anywhere. For all I know, you're spending time with someone who you find much more interesting than you do me. So like, you barely made it up the stairs, and part of you just wants to throw the bags on the ground, turn around, and leave the home again. So immediately notice what might be running through your mind. Don't they know how hard I'm working to keep things going around here? Man, everything is falling on my shoulders these days. I have to do all the driving, the shopping, the housework, make all the decisions, and they think I'm actually interested in having an affair? Wow, I hate this illness so much. And right now, I actually feel like I'm hating them too. Get me out of here. So just inviting you, if those were some of the thoughts that you might be feeling, to check in with what you notice in the body, what sensations are arising when you hear that, those reflections. Maybe you're noticing some tension or some tightness in the body. And because you've attended lots of wonderful teaching and have read a lot, or you might know in your mind what your partner needs to hear right now. You know, it sounds like they're really needing reassurance, something like, you know, oh, I'm so sorry that you didn't know where I was. That can't be a comfortable feeling. Look, I promise I'll be more careful next time to make sure you know where I am. Even if you're not sure how to, that you can guarantee that, but you know that would probably be really settling for them. But what comes out of your mouth is quite different. Oh my goodness, I'm coming and going to try and keep this family afloat. I don't sit down for a moment and you accuse me of disloyalty. That's just nuts. I told you where I was going and you've forgotten. Like you forget so many things because of your dementia. And at that point, your care partner's face falls into profound dismay and they walk out of the room, leaving you surrounded by groceries and with your heart pounding. So I'm going to invite you to reflect for a moment and invite you to take a moment and consider what are some of the things that you might say to yourself in this moment? What are some of the things you might say to yourself in this moment? And I'm going to invite you to actually enter some of them into the chat. So we may have to, let's see if I can see the chat as well as this. There we go. So as you reflect, what are some of the things that you might say to yourself in this moment as you're sitting surrounded by the grocery bags, and your family members left the room? So Erla says, I'm doing the best I can. Way to go. Any others? Anybody have any other experiences? This is the disease speaking, not my partner. Remind yourself just to breathe. Yeah. Remind myself, person can't help it. Right. Well, these are amazing. Stop. Don't react. Okay, I think we can stop the presentation now. you kind of nailed so many of them. And then I wonder, you know, because I certainly know, what would you be saying to yourself about how you did in that moment? That wasn't the most graceful way of handling that. Thank you, Haley. Yeah, beautiful. Would anybody say, oh, you numbskull, you know you should have done it better. You know what you should have done and you can't even do that. Is anybody hard on themselves in those moments? I sure know that that I am. Yeah, these are beautiful. I could have handled that better, but it's okay to make mistakes sometimes. Absolutely. These are self-compassionate responses that I'm reading in the chat. I would have chided myself. Thank you, Anise. I totally get it. It's difficult at that moment not to react. And Selma, I couldn't agree with you more. Stupid, 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 Lori says. Yeah. Some of these, you know, so absolutely, I might know I need a break. And at that moment, I might be quite lost in the self-criticism. So that's what we're actually going to focus on.
I'm not sure how to chat, but I just tell myself it's my mom's brain, or it's the dementia speaking, not my mom.
Exactly. Yes, and absolutely. These are all you know, the kinds of responses we want. Sometimes when sometimes it's just hard. Sometimes things people tell me, for instance, is that they can fuel the negative emotions by sort of moving into their heads and telling stories about, they always do this. I never manage to do this. I never get, there's this hopeless feeling that people describe, or a feeling of powerlessness and self-blame. So self-criticism is the other big one that can really get people into a difficult spot, because self-criticism leads to shame, and shame is a really dark place to be. The other thing that people sometimes do is they move into distracting themselves, sort of saying, oh, well, it's not really a problem, and then reaching for another drink, or reaching for Netflix, or, reaching for another cookie. And, it sounds from the responses that that many people have had is that they've done a lot of work on this, and they've really recognized that that often this is the illness speaking, and that they can take a step back and are seeing it with some perspective. That's brilliant. The problem with self-criticism and hopelessness, on the other hand, or telling, sort of getting lost in the stories if we're not really aware of what's happening, is that we can increase our stress and our anxiety and our depression, and we can start to feel kind of hopeless. So now I'd like to ask you to switch your experience and imagine that a friend has just called you about this very event that you've just described, and they're feeling really upset, and they tell you, they tell you about it. And I'm wondering if you would just say, how might you respond to their distress? What might you say to them?
I find that a lot of us are a bit alone, and a lot of our immediate friends don't have someone in that situation. So it's almost the opposite. It's kind of like your friends, you don't want to talk about it because they don't want to hear negative all the time because they haven't been in that experience. Right. So you tend to keep it internalized a bit. You do say it a bit, but they don't really get it. You can tell by the type of responses they give you.
Right.
And so they don't really understand. And I don't think I would have understood till I was in that situation. So I find it's almost the opposite.
So let's imagine in this particular situation, we're talking about let go of the previous scenario for yourself and imagine that a friend called you. And they were saying, oh, this really difficult situation came and I just blew it and I'm feeling so badly. What might you say to them? What are some of the things?
Well, because I've had that experience, that's why I think it'd be great to kind of pair people up that are going through this experience that don't need to know each other, because there's a lot of people in the situation where their friends aren't facing this. Right. I would be very sympathetic and listen first to what the problem was, and then try to share some ideas or methods that maybe I've used in a similar situation, if I had any, or try to brainstorm with the person.
Right. So you would, and thank you. Thanks, Cindy. I assume this is Cindy who's speaking. And Julie says, I confirm how lucky the parent is to have her in her life to help. Or I'd say, take a breath, take some time out. So very, very, very kind responses, very compassionate responses, actually. And I don't know if you, maybe this isn't the case for you, but certainly listen carefully and kindly, says Ruth. When we feel compassion for others, we do three things. We turn, we see that the person is suffering and we turn towards their suffering, right? We pause and we really listen. So we bring ourselves to kind of a stop place and we really listen to what they're describing. We have a kind response for the other person's pain. And then we feel connected with them through empathy, sort of, we're all vulnerable to this situation. So, this could be me. And so we connect through this sort of shared humanity. Wow, this is a difficult situation. And I know what difficult is like. I may not know that one, but I know what that's like. And these are the pieces of a response that we actually need to apply to ourselves when things go awry. And that's self-compassion. So Jack Cornfield, one of my teachers, says it so beautifully. If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. And my experience with lots of people who are doing this really important work is that they are so focused on caring for the person that they're supporting that sometimes they don't have a ton of compassion for themselves. And so that's what that's what we're going to be exploring a bit in terms of self-compassion. So what is self-compassion then? Self-compassion is simply giving the same kindness to ourselves that we would give to others. And Kristen Neff, who's a researcher and who's done a lot of work in self-compassion, describes it as self-compassion involves treating yourself the way you would treat a friend who's having a hard time, even if your friend blew it, or is feeling inadequate, or is just facing a tough life challenge. Self-compassion is a practice in which we learn to be a good friend to ourselves when we need it most, to become an inner ally rather than an inner enemy. And for most of us, believe it or not, and it sounds like lots of people here have done a lot of work on this. It's not our natural response necessarily to be kind to ourselves. So while we say do unto others as you would have them do unto you, we don't always encourage ourselves to treat others the way we would treat ourselves. Sometimes we are quite bullying of ourselves, and that makes the work and the experience of care partnering challenging. So, what does self-compassion look like? Well, self-compassion is warm and soothing. And as Shauna Shapiro describes in her book, Good Morning, I Love You, self-compassion releases oxytocin, which is the love hormone that facilitates safety and connection, and releases endorphins, which are natural feel-good neurotransmitters. So when we can get to self-compassion, it can be a really nurturing place. So let's do sort of a physical representation of self-compassion. So go back to the scenario we were imagining, and if you were reacting, as I can certainly feel myself at times having been in that space. If you're reacting to the whole situation at the end, your brain was in the fight or flight mode of operation, quite overwhelmed by the situation and feeling accused and unappreciated. And your limbic system is telling yourself it's dangerous, and you're in fight or flight. And if you're in fight or flight, there's muscle tension. So I encourage you to put your hands out in front of you and form fists. Form fists, squeeze them as tightly as you can. This is the physical experience of fight or flight. Also added onto that is the resistance that arises when you criticize your response. This creates more tension. So you're holding your hands with tension. Now let your fists go and open your hands and your fingers wide. So this is kind of a different physical experience. There's openness and spaciousness, and it really represents mindful awareness. So recognizing, oh man, am I ever tense? And inviting it to let go and accepting the emotions and the situation for what it is, no longer kind of resisting or fighting it. So that's kind of the first step of self-compassion, is the mindfulness. Now I'm going to invite you to put your right hand on top of your left hand and bring your two hands to your chest if you feel comfortable to do that. And just notice immediately the soothing warmth of your hands against the chest. And believe it or not, just this action of moving our hands to our chest or on our cheek, if that's more comforting, or rubbing our arms in a hug, these physical expressions activate the relaxation response. And that represents the self-kindness piece of self-compassion. So when we're providing ourselves with self-compassion and we're actually taking the time to do that, it's often helpful to find a touch place on the body that feels warm and soothing. So for me, people know my hand is often on my chest, even when I'm listening to other people's stories. So let's talk about the three components of self-compassion that Kristen Neff kind of put together as part of this concept. So it has three parts to it, and we touched a little bit on mindfulness. So mindfulness, as you might recall from our last session, there's a little message from Liz that someone might have their microphone on, so maybe we can make sure everybody's muted right now. Mindfulness is the awareness that arises. So it's awareness that arises when I pay attention to this moment, to just this moment without judging it. So when I come into awareness as to what's actually happening right here, right now, and I bring my openness and my curiosity and a willingness to be with what is, that's mindfulness. So paying attention on purpose, the present moment, leaving go all my judgments of what I think is going on, really noticing what's happening in my body, what's happening in my mind, what's happening in my heart. And mindfulness is that piece that helps us to pause at the very beginning of the moment when things go awry. So I thought I'd just offer a stop practice. This is a practice that we use in the moment, and it helps us to, when things are perhaps shaky or I'm getting quite activated, I can use the STOP practice, and I think the handout may have been sent out to you with the steps involved. But S stands for stop, or take a sacred pause. T, take 3 slow, like breathing in to the count of 5 and out to the count of 6. So breathing in through your nose and out through pursed lip breathing. So slow and steady 3 times. So that's to activate, again, that parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, so Sarah says this STOP practice is in the list of resources that she put in the chat at the beginning of the session. So once we've stopped and we've taken 3 breaths, then we're going to observe. We're going to observe what's happening right here and now. So I'm going to know what physical sensations am I aware of right now in the body. What thoughts are present right now? What emotions am I aware of right now? I'm not trying to change anything. I'm simply wanting to become aware of what's going on right now. What's happening right now? And can I actually say it's okay? I say it's okay. And then ask myself as the P, I've come into the present moment. How do I want to proceed? How do I want to move forward? What most needs my attention as I move forward? And at that point, I can maybe notice that, whoa, I'm still pretty activated. Maybe I need some moments of self-compassion, or, oh, I'm feeling okay. I just needed to pause there and kind of get my head back in the game. And the STOP practice isn't meant to purposely fix anything, but what it does help us do is to slow down, to move out of that fight or flight response, and helps that prefrontal, that part of the brain behind the forehead, that prefrontal cortex that's really our sophisticated sort of thinking through, evaluating, and planning, to come back online. So then we can make a much wiser decision about how to proceed. So ideally, I encourage people, if they're getting to know the STOP practice, to practice it during the day when you're not particularly activated, just to check in with yourself, to actually notice, to bring yourself out of your head and into this present moment and notice what you're experiencing. Because what happens when we practice recurrently is we build the body memory, so that then when things hit the fan and we're really activated, we can use it as a way of pausing and activating that parasympathetic nervous system. So that's the STOP practice, and it's probably one of the tools that people say they find the most helpful when we're working with family members. So that's the first element, is mindfulness. So I just need to pause, and I need to bring myself back into this moment, not in all the stories, not in the past, not in the future, but right now, what's going on. Secondly, and to be able to say, wow, I'm really struggling. So I'm really struggling. That's where I need to get to move into self-compassion. Then I need to connect it with the fact that I'm not alone. And as sort of Cindy described it, when we are supporting somebody and it's a difficult day, sometimes we do feel like we're so completely alone. But common humanity and connecting in with the fact that struggle is part of life, and that I'm actually one of many care partners who might be having this experience right now, or certainly know what this experience is like. And sometimes if you're part of a support group, for instance, you might think of your colleagues in the support group and think, yeah, they know what this is like. Right, I'm not alone. I'm not alone in experiencing this. And that brings us often into a place then when we can, where we can provide ourselves with self-kindness. So self-kindness is often the most challenging step of self-compassion, and the one that ultimately feels the most meaningful. So here we allow the inner self-critic, the one that has been a bit hard on us for how it all went down, to sort of to be calmed, to be cared for, to be quieted. And we all have that inner voice, and we can train it to speak more kindly when we purposefully use a self-compassionate approach. So here we're moving from self-berating and attacking, if that's happening, to offering ourselves warmth and unconditional acceptance. So these are the three elements: mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness. So I'm going to invite you to join me in a self-compassion break. And I love this little picture of the rabbit with his little paw heart. And so I'm going to walk us through. So I'd invite you to think of a situation in your life that you find particularly challenging or difficult, or that's causing you stress. I'll give you a moment just to think of a situation like that. Recall the situation to mind and see if you can actually recreate it so that you're feeling some of the stress and the emotional discomfort that you might feel when you're in that situation. So whether it's a conversation or whether it's thinking about something that's upsetting for you, perhaps don't choose a 10 out of 10. Maybe choose something that you can generate some worry or some experience of, but not to traumatize yourself with this practice. So the self-compassion break can be done anywhere. It can be done in the grocery store, it can be done in the car, it can be done in the hallway, it can be done in the moment, or it can be done as an actual meditation practice for a few minutes if you want to really take some time and dig into it. So let's walk through. So there are 3 steps, and step 1, recognizing, wow, this is a moment of suffering. This is a moment where I'm struggling. This is hard. This is hard. So this is where we pause and we notice how we're actually feeling in the moment. Yeah, this hurts, or, ouch. Wow, this is stress. You have to find the words that fit you, so I'm just offering up some options here. Yeah, this is a moment of struggle. Yeah. Step 2, remembering that suffering is a part of life. So remembering that other people actually feel this way, that other people know exactly what it is that you're experiencing right now, that I'm not alone. I'm not alone. We all struggle in our lives. Not to minimize it, but to feel connected to our shared experience of humanity. This happens. Life is difficult at times, right? And then inviting you to, again, place your hands on one or both hand on your heart as you move into the 3rd step, and feel the warmth of your hand on your chest, or gently touch your hand to your cheek, or give yourself a hug and just rub your upper arm if that feels good. Or adopt any other warm self-contact that sort of brings you comfort. We're all different as to what that is. And bring in the 3rd step of kindness. So may I be kind to myself? May I give myself the compassion that I need? So you might ask yourself, what do I need to hear right now to express kindness to myself? Is there a phrase that speaks to you in your particular situation? So for me, it's something like, may I be kind to myself right now? Can I hold myself with compassion and care? Can I tap into my strength? Can I be patient with myself? Can I forgive myself if I feel like I've really hurt somebody? And this practice, can be used any time of the day or night, and really can bring some calm, some care, and some kindness. And the more you practice it, the more easily it comes, and also the less noisy your self-critic becomes. So you can open your eyes if you have them closed, and join us here. So some people go, oh, great, okay, so this is what I do when I'm in pain to get rid of the pain. No, self-compassion isn't about getting rid of pain, but it is about soothing and comforting ourselves when we do have pain. So I don't work with self-compassion to get rid of my suffering. I basically work with it because I'm suffering, because it's hard, because this moment was hard. And so what self-compassion does for us is help us to be open to our pain and then to care for ourselves and comfort ourselves. And we become more gentle with ourselves and less self-critical. And the pain actually becomes, less overwhelming. And we bounce back more quickly. So the burden doesn't necessarily get lighter, but our back gets stronger and our ability to deal with situations is really enhanced. So sometimes when I practice self-compassion, sometimes I do feel significantly better, and at other times I won't. I don't have a lot of choice in that, but I can accept that I'm feeling pain, and I can set the intention to comfort myself. So it's the intention. So sometimes when we practice initially, like, yeah, this doesn't do much for me. But if I set the intention to be kind to myself, that's the first step. And over time, it becomes easier and easier to achieve that. So if it's so helpful, why don't we see more self-compassion around? Well, there are a lot of misconceptions about self-compassion. And we'll just very quickly touch on them because I want to be able to get to some good conversation about all of this. But the misconceptions, one is self-compassion. Isn't that kind of selfish to be focused on yourself? Well, the interesting thing is that the research that's actually been done on people who learn self-compassion is they actually tend to be more caring and supportive of others. They are more likely to be willing to compromise, to listen, and they are much more likely to be forgiving of other people. It's that foundation of you have to put on your own oxygen mask first. And if you think you can provide endless compassion to somebody else or to many other people without providing it to yourself, that's a recipe for burnout. So it's a really key skill to take with you. So not at all selfish, it's necessary. Self-compassion is self-indulgent. That can be another thought. So isn't self-compassion all about like a pity party, like poor me, isn't this sad? Actually, self-compassion, because of that second step of common humanity, it recognizes that life is hard for all of us. And when we are self-compassionate, we remember that, oh man, right, everyone suffers like this from time to time. And we tend to be able to move forward and not exaggerate the extent of our own struggles. So it's actually, again, quite opposite to what some people might imagine. Then does self-compassion undermine motivation? Lots of people believe that self-criticism is a good motivator to make change happen, but it's only motivating in the very short term. Self-criticism actually undermines confidence, and it can lead to a real fear of making mistakes. And when we are care partners, actually human beings, we are going to make mistakes all over the place. So it's not, self-criticism is not a good strategy for resilience, whereas self-compassion is actually a key tool that actually does support us and motivating us when we do need to make changes in what we're up to. Will self-compassion undermine my sense of responsibility? Will it make me lazy? Like I'll just keep excusing the behavior if I'm compassionate to myself, or let myself off the hook all the time. And what's actually found, again, with the research is that people who have learned self-compassion take greater personal responsibility for their actions and are more able to apologize if they have offended someone. And that's quite understandable because it's not a disaster. It's just part of life. So you see self-compassionate people actually having more health behaviors and much more conscientious. And again, because they're motivated by wanting others to be happy and well as they want that for themselves. And finally, some people will say, well, self-compassion kind of namby-pamby, weak. And in fact, no, it's an incredibly reliable source of inner strength that confers courage and enhances resilience when we are, faced with difficulty. And research actually shows that people who learn self-compassion are able to work more with traumas and things like divorce and chronic pain. So just to revisit our story, where might we have incorporated a stop practice or a self-compassion break? Well, I could certainly see some of the things that I learned and have learned that if I'm really coming in from a difficult scenario like that person who's carrying all of that baggage, sometimes I need to center myself before I enter. So I might do a stop practice just to check in with myself and see if I can ground myself and center myself before I enter the situation. So then I'm going to be more ready to work with all the things I actually know intellectually about the person's reaction, that in fact it's more the illness or the person's feeling frightened, or I can work with that. But if I'm already activated, I might not be able to do that with a pause and with an ability to mindfully listen. So I might do a stop practice then. Or I could do a stop practice when I'm starting to see that the person's getting super upset and I'm starting to get super upset. I might just say, hold on 1 second, pop out of the room for a minute and just stop, take 3 deep breaths. Okay, how am I? Maybe I need to proceed. How do I need to proceed? Maybe taking 3 more deep breaths and just slowing myself down. So I might do that, or I might do that followed by some moments of self-compassion. Wow, this is super hard already. I can feel this is going to be difficult. Oh man, suffering like this is part of life. Can I be kind to myself right now? Can I really offer myself care? Can I get onto my own side? And then can I re-engage with my partner? Or if it all goes to hell in handbasket, it might be that when I'm sitting with the groceries, I really will pop into a self-compassion break and just take some time to recognize my suffering, to recognize that suffering is part of life, and then to really bathe in those kindness phrases that we talked about. So just to summarize, what is an 8-week experience for people, if you ever have interest and take a mindful self-compassion course, there's so much to self-compassion. And it's a wonderful skill to work on, but just that I would say self-compassion is an essential skill for care partnering because it helps us turn toward our difficult feelings that arise and to comfort ourselves when they're there. It turns imperfections, which is life, into learning opportunities, and it assists us with having wise motivation to make change where we need to. So it helps me say, yeah, maybe I need to work a little bit on my communication strategies. And then when they don't go that well, and then I need to be super kind to myself as I'm developing my skills. And the stop practice and self-compassion break, although we've just touched on them, are 2 mini practices that we can work with in any moment. And there are in the resources that Sarah posted in the chat, there are some links to the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, and they have some wonderful guided meditations and guided 5-minute breaks, so you can actually get used to using the self-compassion break there. So the more we practice self-compassion, the easier it is to tap into when we need it. So there's the resource list, and I encourage you, there's some great YouTube videos by Kristen Neff on the 3 components of self-compassion in general. There are online courses for mindful self-compassion, and if you're interested in mindfulness-based dementia care, my email is there.